I've talked before about how the Crochet-Cast-on is one of my favorite cast-ons for a whole lot of reasons. It makes a great provisional cast-on, and I also really like it for things where I'm not going to go back and finish the bottom edge later, or if I'm going to finish the edge later but I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. So I'll use it for things like scarves so that my cast-on and my bind-off can look exactly the same. And then if you combine that with a slipped stitch edge, you can see how all four edges of your scarf can look exactly alike. The Crochet-Cast-on is really, really easy to do. You're going to start with a slip knot, our trusty slip knot, and of course if I was knitting I'd be leaving a longer tail from here. You can do this with waste yarn to make a provisional cast-on. You can do this with your project yarn. And what you're going to do is select a crochet hook that is just slightly smaller or narrower than your knitting needle. I always have a hard time remembering what crochet hook size goes with what knitting needle size. So a good way to judge that is just to kind of roll them back and forth in your fingers, and you can feel whether you've got the right thing happening here. This crochet hook, which is a G, is just a pinch smaller than my size 7 needle. There's two ways you can do this. You can, if you're comfortable with crochet, you can just dive in and crochet a chain that is one loop shorter than where you want to go. So say you want to cast on 10 stitches, you're going to make, count back here, you're going to make 9 chains, because you're going to count the loop that's on your hook as your 10th. Now I don't know how many I've done there, but and then when you are ready to put those onto the needle, if you look at your chain, you can see how one side of it looks like a chain. If you flip it over, it's got what I call little spinal bumps. And what you can do is take your knitting needle and just pick those little spinal bumps up, and those are your stitches that you're going to be knitting from. Of course, when I want to do this in front of a camera, it doesn't want to cooperate with me, but I assure you it's really pretty easy. So you would just go across like so. Remember, if you want to get the right leg of your stitch in the front and the left leg in back, then you're coming at it from the back, from left to right. And you're just picking up that little bump in the back, putting it onto your needle, and then your loop that was on the hook is going to be your last stitch. So if you've got your stitches on the needle, you can see how you've got that nice even edge that looks just like a bind-off edge, and you can just knit on from here. Now, that's the one way to do it. I was going to say the easiest, but I find the other way easier, to be honest with you. The way that I generally do it is to put it all on the needle all at once. It takes a little bit of concentration for the first couple stitches, but this is the way I generally teach it to students, and they pick it up instantly. You've got your slip knot on a hook, you've got your needle in one hand, and no matter what you would normally do, you're going to be carrying your yarn in your left hand during this cast on. So you're going to lay your needle on top of the yarn, so the yarn passes from the hook underneath your needle over to your left hand. And from here it's simple. You reach over top of the hook or the needle with your hook, grab the yarn, pull through your loop, pass your yarn back underneath the needle, reach over top of the needle with your hook, pull through your loop, put your yarn back underneath the needle, and you can get to the point where you're really pretty comfortable with this. when I'm not doing it for the camera and trying to make it really visible for you, I can do this at 90 miles an hour. And just as with the other method of doing this cast on, you're going to just cast on one stitch less than you need, and then that last loop that is on your hook is going to go onto your needle. So just to review a little bit again, you've got your loop on your hook, you've got your yarn going from your hook to your left hand underneath the needle or behind the needle, depending on how you want to look at it. And you just reach over top of your needle to grab your yarn, pull it through the loop to create a new loop, pass your working yarn behind your needle. Over top, grab the yarn to form a new loop, pass the working yarn underneath your needle. Over top, pull through, pass under, and just put that last stitch up onto your hook. Now, say I do want to use this as a provisional cast on. Let me just knit a row, and then I'll show you what you would do if you were going to take this out later to perhaps knit in the other direction. If you were doing a shawl, I've seen a few lace shawl patterns, excuse my voice, I've seen a few lace shawl patterns that actually start in the middle of the shawl, the center of the shawl, and knit outward towards an end. And then you pick up the free end of the stitches that you cast on and repeat the pattern in the other direction. So here we are. Let me just knit a couple rows so there's something there. So there's lots of ways that you can use this. I recently used this on the Flow tank by Nora Gone. I'm never sure if I'm pronouncing her last name right, but it uses yarn called Seduce that has absolutely no elasticity or bounce to it. So when you do a crochet cast on, because you're going to leave that bottom edge of that tank free, it really looks like poo because the cast on is all loose and sloppy. So what I ended up doing was casting on with waste yarn, doing the crochet cast on. I knitted about 2 inches of fabric according to pattern, and then I came back and zipped out the cast on and did a regular bind off with the working yarn. And then that way I was able to get the look of the crocheted cast on and have a nice neat edge. It's kind of ironic to use the bind off to look like a crochet cast on when the purpose, or one of the purposes of a crochet cast on, is to make it look like the bind off, but there you go, it's interchangeable. Get my waste yarn out of the way. Okay, so suppose I was doing that right now. I'd have with me a separate set of needles, and what I would do is find your loose end, which is the end that does not have your slip knot, and just start to unpick that yarn. The first one just needs a little unpicking. After that, it's like unzipping. Of course, there you go, you little devil. Okay, here you can see the beginning of your first stitch in the gold yarn, which is free. Unpick that last bit to free up that first stitch. And you'd put that stitch onto your spare set of needles, and from here you just pick up stitches and unzip at the same time. And so on all the way across until you've got your other stitches your provisional cast-on stitches onto your needle. And then you can do what you want. If you want to put on an edging of some sort, if you just want to bind them off as I did on my flow top, whatever you need to do. Or if you're knitting a shawl and now you're going to be knitting in the other direction because this side is finished and it's bound off, whatever. It works great for that. Or you can just do it in your project yarn and have that as your cast-on edge, so it'll look like your bind off and match your slip stitch edges. So there you go. That's the Crochet-Cast-on.